Do you want to know how I saved 25K on my taxes this year? Keep listening to find out about a non traditional method to reduce your tax burden. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded MD podcast with your money best friends. I'm Dr. Brittne Halford.
And I'm Dr. Alicia Taylor.
And of course, we're here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time. Hey, Alicia, one of the most important financial tasks we do as doctors is protect ourselves, which means getting the right insurance. I recall purchasing my insurance policy just a few days before I graduated from residency. What was your experience?
So I got my insurance when I graduated from medical school right before I started residency. I actually called a few agents, but I had the best service from Pradeep Auto at PKA Insurance Group. He was super responsive and personable. Unlike some of the other agents, Pradeep actually got me quotes from all the major companies and actually took the time to explain the nuances in each of their policies. What I loved most is that he wasn't just this way for me. Whenever I would send one of my friends to him, he would not only speak to them, but he'd also let them know where to go or who to contact if there were better options or discounts available.
At PKA Insurance Group, Pradeep Auto and Matthew Peterson are independent brokers focusing on disability and life insurance. They excel in securing coverage for physicians and other medical professionals. Discounts on disability insurance can range from 10 to 40% depending on your situation. And there is now an A-plus rated carrier offering up to $10 million of life insurance without lapse. If you are very healthy with limited to no medical issues, approval is likely in 5 minutes. Reach out to PKA Insurance to discuss your disability or life insurance needs at www.pkainsurance.com or call 1-800-258-1018.
All right, Brittne, I know that you just went on this family cruise with your little ones, your husband, and all of your extended family. How did that go?
Alicia, it was so good. It was so good. And not to say the cruise is the best trip that I've ever taken in my life because
Whoa.
I can think about other things. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that, people. But I think why it was so beneficial, it brought us closer together, is the fact that my family was there. There are many people in my family who I've spent a lot of time with growing up and developed strong relationships. And then there are new people like my nieces who I haven't spent much time with because as an adult who lives far away from home, I haven't really spent any time in Michigan since I graduated from undergrad. So it was great to be able to just walk down the hall and go pick up my nieces and say, hey, do you want to come with Auntie? And to have them to share moments with my children. And I just did a FaceTime with one of my nieces. She's 2. She said, oh, me miss you. And I said, oh, just melted my heart. Just melted my heart. So I hope that we could do at least some type of trip together just to bring our children together every single year because that was the most rewarding experience for me.
Oh, I'm happy for you. And you do cruises differently than I do cruises. Because when I'm doing cruises, usually I'm like, am I really going to be on the boat that much? You know, I might get like a room with a window, but I may or may not get a balcony room. But you and your husband are like luxury, girl. And so I think you told me that y'all did a suite. I have never had a suite on a cruise. How was that?
Well, this is my first time being on a cruise, right?
So you don't have anything to compare it to?
I don't have anything to compare it to. But it was really nice because we had 2 rooms. We had like this upgraded, elevated bathroom with the shower. Brooke was actually talking about this last night. She's like, Mommy, I like the shower better on the cruise ship because it just had these buttons that I could press that would give me different pressure and options. And we had enough space for the kids to have their own separate area. The bed that our children slept on was like a king size bed. So my brother brought his kids over because we kind of swapped for like childcare so that we could go out at night. And so we had 4 kids basically sleeping in the king size bed, and the parents could still go in another room and watch TV as they were babysitting. So I really, really like that. The one thing that I would do differently next time is I would not get a suite in the front of the boat because it could be kind of windy and we weren't able to fully capitalize on being on our balcony because of how forceful the wind was blowing.
I see. I see. I see. Did you ever take a look at your family members' rooms who maybe were not in suites? Did you happen to do that?
I did. Definitely not as spacious.
That is correct. That is correct. Fun story. So I have been on a few cruises and I just came back from a cruise. I mentioned that one of my friends was having a bachelorette party on a cruise and we went to the Bahamas and my friend and I had a room in the front of the ship actually as well. And we got rooms with a window. And I think because we were in the front, it actually gave us more space than I think the average person had. We had each of our own beds. It was me and one of my friends from med school. We each had our own bed and then we had two windows, like a couch, a chair. It was like really nice. But I remember when we were booking it, we were trying to decide, do we want a regular room? Do we want a room with a window, room with a balcony? Do we want a suite? Like those are the options. And I remember a couple of years ago when I went to Alaska, I think I mentioned this, right? I did an Alaskan cruise with my family and my dad and my extended family booked it. All they did was send me like, this is how much things cost or whatever. And my dad was going to pay a portion of the trip for me. So he was just like, hey, this is how much money I have for you. Pick what you want. So he was paying for a portion of the trip for me. And he was like, all right, this is how much money you have. What room on the cruise do you want? And I at the time was like, just give me the cheapest room. Like, how bad could it be? Whatever. And Brittne, what I did not realize is that the cheapest room on the cruise was a room with no window. And so it was my boyfriend and I were on the cruise and it was like, okay, we're in this room. It's 7 days and we do not have a window. We are going crazy. I'd never been in a room without a window. Meanwhile, all of my other family members had rooms with balconies and couches because it's Alaska. So you want to be able to look out over your balcony, see the glaciers, see the whales. And I remember my boyfriend being like, you picked this room? And I was like, look, I didn't know. I didn't know. All right, my bad. I'll take that one on the chin. That's my fault. But I remember when me and my friend from med school were going on this cruise, this bachelorette, I was like, girl, we have to have a window. And so we booked a room with a window. But I always see the elevator floor that goes to the suites. And I always wonder, I'm like, is that worth it? That's probably how people feel about me flying business class. You know, you buy your economy ticket and you're like, I just need to get there. And then you see people going to that different area of the plane and you're like, is that really worth it? Right? They probably paid thousands of dollars for it. And you know, me, now I fly business class internationally and I'm like, yes, it's worth it. It's probably how you feel about the suite. Like, yes, girl, I much prefer my suite to your little room.
I think it really depends on how much are you going to spend? How much time are you going to spend in that room? Because for my husband, he likes to relax. He doesn't have to be engaged in all the activities. You know, he also has some work to do. So he brought his computer. So to have enough space that he could separate himself from the kids was valuable. My brother's room had a balcony. They had 2 bunk beds and then the bed. And I think that would have been enough for us because we honestly did not spend a ton of time in the room, but I liked the separation of space. I think the separation of space for 7 days, you know, husband and wife and kids, it just helped.
Speaking of separation of space, I find a lot of people, this is one of the reasons why they like hotel status. I don't know if we've talked about this on this podcast, but I have airline status, not like the highest status, but I have some sort of status where most of the times, if I am traveling domestically, I get upgraded. And this happens every flight that I've been on this year and towards the end of last year and stuff, where I'll buy a main economy ticket and then I'll get upgraded for free into Comfort Plus. People with higher status may get upgraded for free into first class, but you get upgraded because of airline status. So the same thing works with hotel status. If you have hotel status, sometimes you can get free breakfast, but oftentimes you get upgraded into suites. And I've heard of families who specifically like hotel status because they have children. And I don't have children, so this is not something that I think about, but they're like, Leisha, a lot of the hotel rooms, especially outside of America, they have occupancy thresholds. Like in America, remember when you're in college, you'd room with your girlfriends and you sleep 4 to a room and you make it work? Well, in Europe, you can't do that. There's a max 2, maybe some hotels allow 3 people in a room. And so all the people with kids are like, what do I do with my kids? Do I have to just buy multiple hotel rooms? And they do, and it gets really expensive to travel internationally with kids because of that. So a lot of people like hotel status because it comes with free suite upgrades. And they mentioned what you mentioned. Like, it's not that I am super bougie, Leisha. They're just like, I don't want to have to buy 2 hotel rooms. And so with a suite, there's oftentimes a separate room or a separate area for the kids. They're like, Leisha, my kids go to bed at 8. Me and my husband do not want to go to bed at 8. I want to put the kids down and then us be able to like do our thing. We're not going to leave them in the room by themselves, but we at least want to be able to watch a movie or something.
Right.
And so they mentioned kind of what you mentioned. And that sort of brings me to this money mishap confession, which is when I was on the cruise, I remember paying for some extra things just to make the experience a little bit more enjoyable. I know for someone with kids, maybe paying extra means paying for a suite to make it more enjoyable. For me, paying extra meant I paid for internet access I think they probably overcharged for it. It was like $20 a day. But for me, that was worth it, being able to communicate with people. It made my trip a little bit more enjoyable. But I remember having to pay a little bit for internet, paying a little bit for some of the different restaurants on the cruise ship. I don't know if you and your husband did that. Gratuities if you happen to buy a drink or a glass of wine or whatever. So there were some extra costs involved, which I look at my bill and I'm like, oh, I guess I did order that. Oh, I guess I did buy that. And they have that card on file and they'll certainly charge it. So I didn't spend too much. There were definitely some extra expenses. What about for you? Did you have some extra expenses on your cruise?
We did. We got a massage. It was nice. One of the things that I just realized is that you have to be cognizant of what you're spending, cognizant of the details, because they actually charged us for a 75-minute massage. I looked at my watch right when that masseuse walked in the door. As soon as she was done, my eyes were still closed because I was relaxed. I said, Kevin, what time is it? He told me, I'm like, that was not 75 minutes. So they actually charged us incorrectly and I had to get that deducted. And there were some other fees like laundry fees, but laundry was included in our suite package that I had to remove. But my husband and I went out and we went to a restaurant. And so it was $50 extra per person for this particular restaurant. And we enjoyed ourselves. It was a 4-course meal. It was great food. I tried mussels and I've had calamari before, calamari and like all this different type of fish. And so it was great. So I was not upset about spending the extra money because $100 for a 4-course meal at a luxurious restaurant was not a lot of money. I don't know how you felt. It's kind of like the grand that we paid before to get on the cruise was out of sight, out of mind at that point. So I was just enjoying the experience.
I think I talked about this before when I went to Paris and we ate at a Michelin star restaurant in the Eiffel Tower. That was maybe $300 or $400 a person. I mean, granted, when is the next time I'm going to eat at a Michelin star restaurant inside of the Eiffel Tower overlooking the Olympics? Like that was an incredible experience and the food was immaculate. I mean, expensive is relative. I love to eat despite my semi-slim size. And so I definitely splurge when it comes to that. So that's money well spent if you're asking me. I'm glad you all enjoyed yourselves and were able to kind of rectify some of the costs. One of the things to keep in mind is this is a financial podcast of wanting to enjoy yourself, but also making sure that you're not being too cheap. It's like, what's that line? You want to be cost conscious, but you don't want to be so cost conscious that you can't enjoy nice things.
Mhm.
And so just being able to save in advance, maybe setting yourself a limit and saying, okay, what am I okay spending? And then just letting yourself enjoy things. When we were on our cruise, me and my friend from med school, we were deciding if we were going to get the internet package. And I was like, how much is it? She was looking at stuff and she's like, Leisha, I think it's $20 a day. And I was like, ooh, $20 a day. Maybe I could just put my phone on airplane mode and like whatever. It's just like, really? And I was like, okay, you're right. I am being very cheap right now.
And otherwise, there's no way to communicate if you don't have internet. That's what I found communication on a cruise to be the most challenging. Even they had this little chat app. It did not work. So the only person that I could communicate with was my sister-in-law and her sister effectively because my brother did not have his internet depending on if his kids were using their devices or not. And it posed to be extremely challenging. We had to use Messenger because not everybody had the iPhone or WhatsApp or some alternative mode of communication.
Yeah. So I think paying for that was money well spent. And I'm hearing you agree with me. As physicians, one of the most important things that we can do is make sure that we secure our income because a lot of our financial plans are contingent on our high doctor income. One of the things that you will need to do is make sure that you get long-term disability insurance.
Now, Pradeep and his team at PKA Insurance Group have a reputation for putting people over profits and always doing what's best. Do not hesitate to email PKA Insurance and his team today.
They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve. So we both went on cruises. We both went on vacation. We both recently also paid our taxes. And so this is tax season. And so a lot of people are sort of in this mode. You teased at the top of the episode, Brittne, that you saved $25,000 on your taxes. So I think that I'm good at taxes, but I don't know if I'm $25,000 savings good. Please enlighten me. Selfishly, I want to know all the details. And I'm sure our listeners on what you and your husband have been able to do to save you so much in taxes.
Yeah, Alicia, this was one of those things that I don't know if you do this or not, but it kept me up at night. Like I had a little bit of anxiety thinking about, okay, we have this huge tax bill at the end of the year. And yes, we work with Alexis. Yes, some of this was already expected, but it's kind of like, I don't know about you. When I'm thinking about numbers and things, sometimes I push things in the recesses of my brain until I have to actively think about them. And so this was one of the things that I had kind of forgotten about that I needed to remember. I should have remembered of how much we were going to pay or need to pay in taxes. So come December, when I'm filling out my end of the year thing and they're giving us the estimate, I'm like, oh crap, we have to pay. I'm not going to tell you all the exact number, but of course it was more than 25,000 if I saved 25,000 with a single tax move. So we have to pay a lot of money on taxes come April. Yes, we have the money, but do I actually want to use the money that is in our bank accounts in order to pay all of the taxes? And I did not. So what I did was I thought about what are some buckets of money that we have access to that we potentially want to repurpose to invest in an alternative investment, oil and gas, that could help us to reduce our taxable income. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity because last year we invested in oil and gas a smaller amount than what we invested this year. And so I was able to kind of build some confidence in doing this and understanding how the maneuver might work. So essentially, we have a financial advisor that I've been desiring to fire. But again, it's like one of those things that is on my to-do list that I have not done yet.
Oop, hope you're not listening to this. Sorry, whoever you are, you might be out of clients.
I think he kind of knows that I'm not
Well,
going to
he
drop
knows
any
now.
names. So I've been wanting to move money from them. We talk all the time about using a financial advisor who has a 1% under assets under management fee and how it depreciates your returns over time. So I'm very much aware of the cost that we're paying by using him. And I want to move all of our money from him. But just again, it has not been a huge priority and I haven't created a strategy for doing that. So this presented an opportunity for me to basically leverage one investment bucket and convert it into another investment bucket while saving on taxes. So that's what I'm going to walk us through that tax move in a little bit more detail because it's not as easy as just saying, okay, I'm going to take money from my financial advisor that he has invested in stocks and then I'm going to put it in oil and gas. Yeah, I'm going to save 25K or whatever amount of money instantly. You know, this is something that I really had to process and do some of the calculations. So we're going to work through that during this conversation here.
Well, let's start at the beginning because you mentioned that it saves you 25K. So obviously you had to owe more than that, right? And I'm curious because you and your husband both have employee jobs. You work at a place, but then you also both make money on the side. And so one of the things that's always shocking to me when I do my own taxes is like, how much money do I owe in taxes this year? Wow, that is kind of a lot. And I'm sure you and your husband are also like, man, how much are we paying in taxes? It's quite substantial. And so I want to kind of start there because it seems like you all already had taxes taken out of each of your paychecks at your jobs. And in addition to what you already had taken out, you both owed more than 25K extra. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Wow, you're rich. I'm like, wow, you got to make a lot of money to pay a lot of money. Y'all must be doing very well over there, okay? Because help me out, all right? You want to donate to the Alicia Fund? I'm accepting donations. Congratulations on you and your man, honey, because y'all are doing great, it seems.
Like I said, it's a burden and a blessing. And so I acknowledge that because we have this tax burden, that this means that we are doing quite well for ourselves. And I appreciate that. There's nothing wrong paying the taxes. But for me, it's like, okay, how could I potentially save a little bit of money? And then thinking about how could saving 35%, right? Essentially saving 35% on this bucket of money work to our benefit. And then how does that compare to what we might gain in the stock market or just paying the taxes now and then investing it in a different way? And so that was a lot of the calculus that I was thinking about. But essentially 1/3 of the money we make goes towards taxes. And that's why tax planning is really critical for us. And I wish actually that I would have done this calculus a little bit earlier than December because it stressed me out a bit doing it at the end of the year. But yeah, you're right. We pay a lot of money in taxes. We earn a lot of money. And so that is a blessing. Honestly, when you think about some of the deductions that we get or that we have access to, not all of them can reduce your active W-2 income. So although we have businesses, still the largest proportion of the money that we bring home is due to W-2. And that poses a problem for many high earners. Many high earners have a tax burden because they're even like real estate property and some of those other things that can help to offer a deduction cannot reduce your active income, your W-2 income. And that was where oil and gas really helped us in this case.
Yeah, I think you bring up a few points. Number one, you're married, I'm not. And so I think that also can complicate someone's tax burden. One of the questions that I oftentimes get from former residents who know that I'm pretty good with money is they'll email me or they'll text me, "Hey, Leisha, why am I owing on my taxes if I had money deducted from my paycheck?" That is a very common question that I get. And I go, well, the simple reason is that you didn't pay enough. And they're like, well, how is that possible? Because isn't my job supposed to calculate this? And I go, yes. And if you made money in other sources, if you had 1099 income, you may not have paid taxes on that. Oftentimes, this is an issue when people are married, because if you are, let's say, a high income professional and your spouse also makes money, if you file your taxes jointly, when you add both incomes, right, your income and your spouse's income, it may push you into a different tax bracket. And so it's entirely possible that your employer is taking out a percentage in taxes based on what you make alone, and they are not factoring in what your spouse makes, and the fact that your spouse, when they add that income together, may push you into a different tax bracket. So maybe your employer is taking out taxes on your behalf at, I don't know, a 25% tax rate, but really they should be taking it out at a 30% tax rate because you have this additional income from your spouse or from other sources that they are not aware of. And so this is a common question that people ask me. And the other thing is what you said is, Leisha, how can I reduce this, right? They're like, I pay a lot in taxes. How can I pay less? That's also a common question. And what you're bringing up, Brittne, is the fact that it's not that simple. It's not that, all right, I have a deduction here, so I can subtract that from what I owe at my job. It's not that easy. They separate the income. There's different kinds of income that you can make. And if we put it simply, there's active income, right? This is income that you're working for versus passive income, money that you're making without having to do much. And what you're saying is that oftentimes we have these different deductions, but it's like, all right, a deduction in one place, well, that only subtracts from your passive income, right? It may not subtract from your active income. In other words, you may be able to deduct money from this pot, but it may not affect the amount of taxes that you owe from like your physician job or your main job. And so one of the things that I think you mentioned, Brittne, is that through oil and gas investments, you all have been able to find a way to actually decrease the tax burden from your active income, which is your main source of income, which I think is what makes this so savvy. Because oftentimes what we hear is max out your 401k contributions and your 403b contributions, do your backdoor Roth, do your FSA or HSA each year. And most people are like, that makes sense, I can do that. If you have a mortgage, deduct that. If you give to charity, deduct that. And then people are stuck and saying, what else can I do? What else can I do? And what you're saying is another thing that you and your husband have decided to do, in addition to cash balance plans and other things that we've talked about on prior episodes, is you've decided to invest more in oil and gas. And so I'd love to hear more about that decision, how you invest in oil and gas, how much it costs, how you did the calculations, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Oil and gas essentially allows you to reduce your active income from about, let's say, 75 to 85% of the investments that can be written off in the first year. So I'm going to give you an example. The first year that we did this, I'm going to be completely transparent with you all. The first year that we did this, we had never done it before, so we didn't want to put a ton of money into this particular investment, but we saw it as an opportunity to diversify how we were investing. So we put $25,000 in oil and gas. So what that does is it gives us about 87% deduction from our taxable income. If you make, let's say, $40,000, you put $25,000 in. I'm just using these numbers to try to make the math simple. And you get about an 85% reduction off of your income. Then that'll put you kind of around $20,000 that it will reduce your incomes. Instead of $40,000 of your income being taxed, you have now this amount of $20,000 that will be deducted from that $40,000. So it decreases the amount that's taxed to $20,000. So for us, given a little bit more specific numbers, we invested $25,000 and we got about an 87% reduction on that $25,000, which equated to about $21,000. So we were able to basically take an amount that we made and subtract $21,000 from the amount that we made. Now, the tax benefit to you, the amount of actual tax savings, will depend on what you said, Leisha, like your marginal tax bracket, your effective tax rate. But for us as high income earners, we're right at that 30% ish, 30% plus for us. If we deducted our income by 21% and say it's 33% tax bracket, then we saved about 7 grand last year on our taxes last year. So kind of that same math is what we're applying here, is that because the IRS allows oil and gas investors to deduct these drilling costs up front, it's called intangible drilling cost up front, you get to deduct 75 to 80-ish% of that investment from your active income in year one. And depending on your marginal tax bracket and your effective tax rate, that can get you significant savings. 100K, about what we invested this year, you can deduct about 75 to 85,000 at a 35% tax bracket will give you about 25K to 30K in tax savings. So that is what we did. And this matters because, as you said, we can't take all deductions from our active income. And so this was one of the ways that we were able to do that.
Yeah. So let me highlight some things and just make sure I understand. So the government basically incentivizes certain behaviors. They say, if you do this thing, we are going to reward you by allowing you to pay less in taxes. If you give to charity, we'll reward you by allowing you to deduct the amount that you gave from your taxes. If you buy a house, we'll reward you by allowing you to deduct your mortgage interest from your taxes. If you start a business, we will reward you by allowing you to deduct some of your business expenses from your taxes. And it seems like what I'm hearing you say, Brittne, is another thing that the government incentivizes is investments in oil and gas, right? They want to invest in energy solutions. And so they say, hey, if you invest in energy, we will reward you by allowing you to pay less in taxes. That's what I'm hearing you say. And I think the next thing I'm hearing you say is the math gets a little complicated. So I'm glad that you explained it. But what I think it was, all right, you invest a certain amount, in your case, $25,000 last year, $100,000 this year. And let's just pause there, because the fact that you had $100,000 to invest in oil and gas is like, all right, we're living different lives.
We're going to talk about the rest of the math. We're not done with the story yet, but we got to talk about it, right?
I'm like, whoa. So anyway, last year, 25,000, this year around 100,000. But basically the government says, all right, take what you're investing in oil and gas. This year was $100,000. You can write off 75% of 85% of your investment. So 75 to 85% of the 100,000 that you invested. For me, it might be like 10,000 I invested, right? Maybe I would write off $7,000 or $8,000 of that, right? So you can write that off on your taxes. When you subtract that from your active income, that's where you get the tax savings. So if you're writing off $75,000 and you're in the 30% tax bracket, then you get your savings. I think that that's important. I'm curious though, because I think obviously this saves a lot in taxes. Are there any other nuances involved? Do you have to recapture your depreciation when you sell the investment? Do you have to pay that back over time? Or it's just like a massive tax savings in year one, and then you don't really have to worry about much in the other years?
Yeah, it's a massive tax savings in year one. There's more to oil and gas that we'll talk about in year 2 through 5 that actually play into this decision and why this works well for us in particular. But the massive savings that you get within investment of oil and gas is in year one, is the immediate tax savings. The oil and gas in year 2 through 5, essentially you get the steady cash flow. You get a return of the money that you invested,
like the profits that you got from the investment itself. Let me ask you some other nuanced questions. Is there certain length of time you have to have the money invested in oil and gas? Like when can you pull the money out?
Yeah, so that speaks to some of kind of the benefits and the drawbacks of doing this. So one of the drawbacks of doing this is that the money is illiquid. So it's not like stocks and bonds where you can pull the money out and get your cash value at almost any time, or at least you know when you can pull the money out. So the money is illiquid. That was one of the things that I had to consider. And of course, we have more money that we could have put to save in taxes, but I was like, we don't want to put all of our money in oil and gas, and it's illiquid. So that is one of the drawbacks. Another one is that there might be some tax burden on the distributions in year 2 through 5. And then actually in 6 through 10, there's continued distributions of oil and gas, because typically I think about a well has like a 10-year lifespan. And so the distributions are going to be smaller, but on the profits that are continued to accrue in year 6 through 10, you will get a payout for those as well. You get some depreciation of that distribution. So you would get the smaller tax deduction of 10 to 15% from oil and gas that remains kind of tax free. And that is because of the depletion deduction that the IRS allows over time. So you just got to think about, okay, I get this immediate tax deduction, but then any distributions from the profits that I receive every year, I'm going to have to pay some taxes on that. And because it's passive income, you would pay passive ordinary income tax on that. And now, how does that offset some of the other passive gain or passive losses that you might have so that you can balance it out and be kind of tax neutral and not create this additional tax burden later on for yourself?
Yeah, because I'm thinking about it and I'm like, all right, you're able to save $25,000 in your taxes because you could write off or reduce your active income by 75,000. That sounds fantastic. But I guess the thing that trips me up is you're still investing $100,000. So it's like you're investing $100,000 in order to save $25,000 in taxes. So you have to have $100,000 to invest in the first place. And then you have to say, all right, is that worth it? Because I think for some people, they want to save money on their taxes, but they don't necessarily want to pay a substantial amount in order to do so. So it's like, all right, you could, option number one, not invest in oil and gas and pay more in taxes, but then you would still be able to keep more of your money. Or you could say, hey, my priority is saving money in taxes, so I'm going to invest substantially more than I would have otherwise, but you still don't have access to that money that you've invested, right? It's invested, you're going to keep it there for 10 years or whatever, but you're going to do that to save money on taxes. And so for me, it's about making sure, does the money even out? Because I think there are lots of opportunities to invest, but for me, it's like, do I need that $100,000? That's the part that's stuck on is, do I want to use that $100,000 for something else, knowing that I'll have to pay taxes on that? Or is it disposable income for me that I can afford to invest for 10 plus years in oil and gas? And I think this is sort of highlights the fact that we're in different scenarios, right? I'm at the point where I don't have a home yet, and I would like to be able to purchase one. You and your husband have two homes, right? And so it's like, all right, there are some financial priorities that I have, and I want to save for some of those things first. You pay down your student loans. Fantastic. I still have some student loans. All right, maybe this is something I can look forward to doing later on in life once I've already met some of these key financial milestones that are important to me personally. But I can see how someone in your position, you've already got the mortgage. You've already got the kids. I don't think you're expanding your family anymore. You all are looking for ways to really decrease your tax burden because you thankfully have a good amount of income to play with. And so I think this kind of highlights different priorities and really making sure that you do the full math.
Yeah, I think you highlight a lot of the things that I considered. You're also investing 100K. That's an investment. And you never know. What if the well comes up dry and there's no payouts? They have some safeguards for discussing that, but it's not 100% that they guarantee that you will get any type of payout. So you have to invest this money just like you think about other investments, that this is not money that I'm going to need in the next 5+ years because there's some risk to doing this. And I could end up losing all of my money. That risk is the risk of investing in many things. There's going to be a spectrum of risk depending on the type of investment that you're utilizing. But that was a consideration for us. And in this case, I have this problem that I need to solve right now. And this was an opportunity for me to solve that problem. And the way that I did it is not using money that was in our bank account. That's why I used money that was already invested somewhere else that was kind of out of sight, out of mind. And I just converted it over into a different type of investment. So for me, that also helped me to accomplish a goal, which I had wanted to transition from this financial advisor and convert some of that money from him and leverage this opportunity all at the same time. But you're right. This is not something that I was just like, oh, this is definitely the right answer. I understood that there were some drawbacks and that there were some reasons why we should not make this move. But this is something that many people do. And I wanted to share it with our audience. So I just want to make sure we clarify. So in year one, you get this huge tax savings because of the intangible drilling costs. And then in year 2 and 5, you get these quarterly payouts of your distribution. And it is expected that you're going to essentially get your money back between year 2 and 5. If you invest $100,000, then you might see that there might be a cumulative annual distribution of about $20,000 to $25,000 because you're getting your money back, your initial investment over the course of the 2 to 5 years. And then in years 6 through 10 is the long-term passive income where the oil wells continue to produce for 10 plus years. And so you get to get the profits keep coming in. Now, those distributions, I'm not 100% sure on what those distributions are going to be. I don't think it's going to be the same 25K that we might see per year. Based upon when I talked with the advisor, he said that they'll be smaller. So maybe instead of getting 25K per year, we might get 18K per year. And it really depends on the production of the well. And then those will keep coming in as passive income. But again, you have to remember that they're going to be taxed at passive ordinary income rates. And you have to consider, okay, what are going to be some passive losses, if I have any, that might offset this additional tax burden by having these payouts.
No, that's really helpful. And thank you for explaining the structure. The first year, you get the biggest tax deduction. And then years 2, 3, 4, and 5, you're getting your money back essentially that you invested. And then after those years is when you're really getting the profits. And so thanks for explaining that. I guess some other nuances, because people might be listening to this and might be very interested. Are there certain stipulations? Like, do you need to be an accredited investor in order to make these kinds of investments? And for those who are not aware, accredited investor is basically deemed by the government as you make enough money and you have a high enough net worth that you can afford to take these sorts of riskier investments. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Brittne, I think that the stipulation is you have to make at least $200,000 a year for at least 2 straight years or have a net worth of $1 million. Is that the stipulation?
I actually don't know what the net worth is, but yes, the $200,000 annually if you're a single filer, or $300,000 for joint filers for the past 2 years. I'm not 100% on the net worth of at least $1 million.
So you have to be an accredited investor. So for most physicians who are attending, you kind of meet that by virtue of your job for the most part. But those are some of the stipulations. How did you vet this investment? Like, how do you know you're not going to just lose your money? How did you invest in it? Like, you took money from your brokerage account and you transferred it to, like, you picked an oil and gas company and were like, here you go. Did they get a flyer in the mail and you're like, yep, this one looks good? Like, how did you pick the investment and evaluate it?
So that's a great question. So this was not something that I would have initially thought about, investing in oil and gas in this way. And it was something that was brought to me by a trusted source, our tax strategist actually. And she talked to this company, partnered with them in a way. Unfortunately or fortunately, she doesn't get any payouts for sending her clients to this company, but this was an option of oil and gas investment. So this was someone who basically had a referral from someone who I trusted. And so that's where I just started with them. But since now knowing about oil and gas, there are other people that I found that are drilling and have established companies. And I actually reached out to her to say, hey, do you have any offers for accepting partners for any of your wells? And she did not have any opportunities at that time. So I went back to our previous guy who we invested in. So I think the biggest thing is to have a conversation with them and to have a conversation to, one, understand, okay, how are they explaining the details of this? Do they have any information that you can review, that you can sit with, that you can Google, do your research and see how it feels for you? So those were the first 2 places that I started. I had a conversation with the investor. I asked him a ton of questions about, okay, how long have you all been doing this? What have your wells typically done as far as performance and payouts? Have you ever defaulted on any of the payouts of your investors? Do you have any documentation to kind of show that? What is the actual company? And I was able to do some research from that perspective. He also had alternative investing options that we did not go with because for me, it felt too risky from like IRS audit perspective, or it felt too risky for me actually getting my money back. So I just kind of allowed my gut feeling and then also my ability to review the documentation, research to confirm what he told me. And also having a good understanding of where we are financially. As you mentioned, a lot of people don't just have 100K or 25K or whatever to invest, knowing that there is some risk that they could lose all of their money. So I wanted to make sure that from a financial perspective, that we could take on this risk, understanding the potential benefit to us as well.
Yeah, this is certainly a lot to think about. Is oftentimes I get these ideas and I'm like, okay, maybe not this year for me, but maybe next year. So I think this is definitely something to keep in mind. One of the things that I would want to know is, I think you mentioned that your tax strategist sort of brought you this opportunity or mentioned it. And then it seems like she had some ideas of companies that you could go with in order to make that investment. That's oftentimes the first step is getting a reference from somebody that you know and trust. And it seems like you got that and that kind of sets you along that path. And you were obviously able to ask questions, do your due diligence, and do a smaller investment initially and just kind of see how that goes. I know that you pay a tax strategist, but how do they pay you your investments? I find that oftentimes when you start making these kinds of private investments, you really do need a tax strategist and a tax professional because you're often getting this income in different ways and needing to deduct or whatever certain things. Has this complicated your tax life?
It has not. It has not. We become a general partner investor of this company and we just get a K1. Like I called the company yesterday and she's like, oh, our K1s are not ready yet. We expect that we will have them out by this date. So besides having another K1 to include in my upload of documents for taxes, is it has not complicated anything. When we established the account, essentially what we did is we worked with this financial advisor. I said, okay, we want to invest this amount of money. There are minimums for getting into these types of accounts. So for us, last year, 25K was the minimum. I don't know if there's a maximum, I think is 200 million for it. Clearly, we're not that, but they have different unit sizes and offerings. And so we were able to invest the amount that we invested, 100K this year. And essentially what we did was we met with him. We determined the amount. I had to fill out some documents. We had to verify our identity. We also had to verify our income with our tax returns. And once we are established as an accredited investor through them, we just wired the money over to the oil and gas drilling company, then established an account with them so that they could have direct payouts into our bank account. So every quarter we get a payout. I see it there. And then we get a K1. It's quite amazing how much they produce. I think I reviewed it. It was like $91 million, like this particular drilling opportunity, this well returned. And of course, I don't know how many investors they have and how the payouts are going to look, but they made a lot in profits, I'm sure. But it's really, really easy. It's honestly very easy to do. You just see your distributions every quarter.
Yeah, this reminds me a little bit of private real estate investing when people invest in apartment syndications and they're either general partner, the GP, or the limited partner, the LP, figuring out those returns and things, which kind of brings up two questions. I guess for tax situations, what I hear the most is that you need a K1 and they're oftentimes not given to you in time. So most people who make these kinds of investments will need to file an extension. It probably doesn't matter as much to you because you and your husband already plan to file an extension. That is one of the things that I've heard is once you start getting into private real estate investments, oil and gas investments, and you start getting K1s, oftentimes those are delayed, not given to you on time. So you are forced to file extensions. And then the second thing is kind of like, how does this compare to regular just index investing? What are your returns in oil and gas? What are your returns from private real estate? And how does that compare to these other kind of investments? I'm curious, have you done any sort of calculation to figure out how your investment returns on these things compare to index fund investing?
I have. Honestly, it will depend a bit on what your index fund investing is doing as far as a performance. I want to take us from year one, 5 years, and then 10 years, because essentially this is supposed to pay out over 10 years.
Okay.
So year one, I get the immediate tax savings. One might think that, okay, well, she just saved 35% on taxes, right? So that is kind of the return that I get immediately. But then I get my money back over the course of 5 years. So basically, after getting my money back, my initial investment was 100K. I get 100K back, but then I also saved 25K on taxes. I got 25K. So then when I think about that return, it might be that I annualize that over 5 years, then that might give me about a 6% return. So this is a more conservative type of investment when you're thinking about how you're investing your money. But then you're going to get more money back and the payouts are going to vary a little bit for year 6 through 10. But say you get double your money back during that time. And when I did that calculation, I think it put about a 12% return on investment. So if you compare to the expected annualized return of the stock market every year of 7 to 10%, it's about that. But again, your money is illiquid, right? You can't pull it out at any given time, and it is not guaranteed to be a doubling of your return plus the tax savings. When I was doing this calculation of moving this money, I also had to think about another thing, which is capital capital gains tax, right? And capital gains tax will erode some of what we're considering as far as the return. So we had to pay a little bit of capital gains tax in order to sell the investments with our financial advisor and to move them into oil and gas. So capital gains tax basically is when you sell an asset, stock, real estate, et cetera, for more than what you paid, you owe capital gains tax on that profit. And if you have short-term capital gains held less than a year, you're going to be taxed at ordinary income versus long-term capital gains taxed at a lower rate. And that lower rate really depends on your taxable income for that year. So not only are we at the highest tax bracket for our earned income and, like the federal income marginal tax rates, but we also are for capital gains tax rates. So we would expect that we would pay 20% on any capital gains of the investments that we sold. So we basically sold a mix of investments that we've held for over a year so we could be taxed at that long-term capital gains rate, which is lower than ordinary income. And then not all of the money, so not all of the $100,000 that we got back to put in the oil and gas was capital gains because we invested money into the stock market. I think from this mix, we had about 10,000, maybe a little bit less in profits. And then we had to pay 20% on that. So we paid a little bit of capital gains, about $2,000 of capital gains. And that's going to deduct from basically our benefits of the tax savings. So you just want to think about this calculus as well. What are the additional expenses that I might pay in order to do this move? And what might you lose in gains by keeping your money in the stock market, depending on how things were returning? With this particular financial advisor, how he was managing our investments, they were at around 8 to 9%. So not doing that great. And I felt like, okay, this could offer to help to solve an immediate problem that I have, offer some potential gains over time as far as a return on investment. And it helps us to diversify the types of investments that we have.
Okay, that was a lot, but I think what I heard you say is that this is not necessarily the most lucrative investment you could have made. You save a lot of money in the first year, but then the next few years is spent recouping the money that you invested. After you recoup the money you invested, then you really start making a profit. So if you annualize that, if you average that over 10 years, you're getting about the same returns that you would on average in the stock market. It's just presented to you differently. It's not like you're getting that same return each year. The first year you get this big tax savings. The next few years are spent recouping your costs. And then the last few years are spent getting sort of more of a profit. And so it averaged out to be more of an average return. And so you have to think, all right, this is a way I can diversify my investment portfolio. This is a way that I can maybe save money in taxes, but it may not be the most lucrative investment. And you got to figure out what makes the most sense for you. A lot of people do like to diversify in this way. And it seems like this has worked out really well for you and your husband. And I know that we're running short on time. So I just wanted to end with sort of this question, which is who should consider this sort of investment? People may be listening to this, may be interested. Who do you think should consider oil and gas investing?
Yeah, I think one, if you have a tax problem, because that's where you're going to get some of the greatest benefits. So one, if you have a tax problem that you're trying to solve, so high income earners, if you meet the eligibility criteria for the accredited investor, and if you have most of your money in stocks, bonds, or real estate, and you're trying to diversify how you're investing, then I think that this is a good opportunity. One of the things that I mentioned is you're going to have these additional distributions that you'll have to pay passive ordinary income tax on. And that was one of the other calculus that I included is because of our rental property, we have some passive losses. It helps me to have this additional passive gains, and I could capitalize on that passive losses in the actual year instead of pushing those losses down to the future. So right now, it has helped me to kind of solve two problems, that there were passive losses that I wasn't able to capitalize on, and let me use those losses now with these gains to kind of make us tax neutral from both of these investments. So if you're someone who has real estate and you have these losses that you want to capitalize on or other forms of passive losses, then this can help you to balance out both of those.
Yeah. And then also, I think earlier you mentioned it can offset some of your active income, right? And so even if you don't have passive losses, if you just got a high amount of active income that you want to decrease your tax burden, this might be a consideration, especially if you're someone who's thinking about diversifying, you meet the accredited investor threshold, and you're looking to sort of save a substantial amount in taxes. One of the things I've realized is a lot of people think they have a tax problem. Anybody who pays taxes is like, I got a tax problem. Maybe if you're paying a substantial amount in taxes, which I get it is relative, but you and your husband are both high income earners. And so you were paying probably close to six figures, if not more, in taxes. And so I think that probably you're like, yeah, girl, yes, this is one of the moves we made. And also, if you had the discretionary income to spend, we talked about at the top of this podcast, for me, probably could invest in this, but it's like, all right, I have other financial priorities at this time. But I think for me, it's helpful to know that this is an option and this might be something I consider in the future. So this is great. Thanks for breaking this down. Shout out to your tax strategist for mentioning it to you all. And hopefully our audience learned something today. All right, before we close out this episode, we'll get into our fun money segment. I don't know if it's fun, but I am going to buy another lamp for my living room. I've got this credit card credit for Dell Technologies. I can buy like $200 worth of stuff from Dell Technologies every 6 months. And I was like, okay, what do I need? I bought a printer before, bought some headphones before, bought some charger adapter things, world adapters. When I travel internationally, I have like an adapter. So I've been thinking about these things to purchase, and I want a lamp in my living room, and they actually sell those on Dell. So I'm going to purchase that. So that's something fun that I'm going to do with money. It could turn the living room different colors. I think that'll be neat.
That's super cool. I can't wait to come by the place and play with the lamp and turn the, I will have a whole disco. All right. So that sounds much funner than what I'm doing with my money, which is purchasing QuickBooks. I had talked about keeping all the documents in order, and I have used the Adobe app, and it works sometimes. In accounting, I've gone and looked at some things in my credit card statements. I have the spreadsheets, but honestly, I just want to simplify the process. So I said I'm going to pay the $35 a month for QuickBooks for business accounting and bookkeeping. And that's just what I'm going to do. And so I'm expecting that it's going to free up a lot of my time and also save some energy and headaches. That's how I'm spending my money to solve a problem.
Well, I hope you have fun with the QuickBooks. And I know that even if QuickBooks itself isn't fun, saving money and saving time is. So I am happy for you. Alrighty. Hopefully you all learned something from this episode. We will be back to you again next week.
Hello, and thank you for listening to our podcast. And because of that, we have something for you, our Wealthy Minds Blueprint.
Have you ever thought to yourself, I wish I could be better with money? Do you want to start investing and saving for retirement, but keep delaying because you don't know where to start? Our Wealthy Minds Blueprint is here to help.
This guide will teach you what you didn't learn in your training, so you can stop being confused about money and start taking what we call wealthy-minded action.
We'll help you become a master of your finances and simplify investing so you can get started today. Take control of your financial future by downloading your free copy of the Wealthy Minds Blueprint now and start building the wealth you deserve.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for my mommy, Dr. Brittne Halford, and her friend, Dr. Lisa Taylor. Just so you know, they're not financial advisors, tax professionals, lawyers, or financial planners. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, you know. So use your best judgment, chat with a tax professional, and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.
One of the most important things you can do is ensure you have long-term disability insurance. Long-term disability insurance secures your income if the unexpected happens and you are unable to work due to medical illness, chronic conditions, or an accident.
Unfortunately, all insurance agents aren't created equal. Some of them are so focused on making a sale that they fail to reveal certain necessary information, tell you about discounts available, or clearly explain the process. Pradeep Bhatt and his team at PKA Insurance Group are different. They have a reputation of putting people over profits and always doing what's best.
If you need life insurance or disability insurance, reach out to Pradeep and his team today. They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve.